Hi, I'm Mauricio Schuler and you're listening to the Schulering Hub, a podcast gathering hospitality professionals from around the world to talk about what hospitality is and what it isn't, and their lives, the innovations, and the ideas that set some businesses apart and others not. We also talk about the future, the trends, and recently we embarked on a journey to search for happiness in hospitality. What makes hospitality a happy place? What are the hurdles that block happiness from happening? And what can we do to overcome them? I invite you to be part of this journey. Comment and send us a message of how our conversation impacts your day. Ask me a question or tell me a guest you'd like to listen to. We make this for you, so I hope you enjoy it.
We build 3 or 4 startups a year from scratch, and all of our startups are the intersection of tourism, tech, and regeneration. So we're building regenerative tourism startups that are scalable.
This is Peterson, founder of Purple Elephant Ventures based in Nairobi, Kenya. I met Ben at the UN Tourism Startup Challenge back in February 2024, where his company, along with our Schulering Hub, was one of the finalists in the innovation and sustainability category.
But really old school in the way that it operates.
We also discussed a deep dive into Africa's startup ecosystem, the inception and mission of Purple Elephant Ventures in revolutionizing African tourism, the unique venture studio models that they use, his successful ventures so far, strategies for sustainable growth, and technological integrations in the African tourism, and the exciting future of African tourism beyond traditional hotspots toward diverse and world-class experiences. Before we engage on that though, Nah-Dja Tien and I continue our quest for happiness in hospitality, discussing how leadership confidence can have both a positive and negative impact on the staff well-being. Hello, Schiller, and welcome back. Here's Mauricio Schuler, your host, and I have once again Nah-Dja Tien sharing the microphone with me. Nah-Dja, welcome back.
Nice to be here, Mauricio. Thanks for inviting me.
It's always a pleasure, Nah-Dja. And today, in the quest for happiness in hospitality, we will talk about building up confidence of our teams, of our leaders. And this is something that probably we don't speak too much about because we try to consider that we are all confident enough to be leaders in our industry. But there are a few things that you need to have that level of confidence to be able to follow changes in the market or to guide your teams. Have you worked with someone that was extra confident or very low in confidence?
Both. Absolutely both. I had some managers in my past. They were way too confident, and to a level that it was absolutely impossible to work with those kind of overconfident people. But also the other way around. I mean, most of the people that I used to work with, when you go up into a higher level, assistant general managers, or food and beverage managers, stuff like that, confidence comes with the years. I can tell you, Mauricio, when I was offered for the first time in my life a food and beverage manager, being a waiter most of my early career, this food and beverage manager position was like gods. They were the ones, and then somebody offered it to me, and I remember the weeks before I started on my first day, I was peeing my pants. I was not confident at all. And again, the general manager of that hotel was, letting me be. Of course, results had to be made, but I grew into that role and actually was able to make that a very profitable operation. And once you get to that level, then the confidence comes with it,
And did you receive any type of training to build up your confidence, or any type of a conversation that it was with leaders that to help you in assessing where is your confidence level to that task? to perform better? Does it help?
I never had that question, Maurizio. We had a previous talk, and it was about mentorship, and mentorship. This is a kind of question that you would get from a mentor. Yeah, but in the business that I was working in, those kind of questions were not there. Yeah, nobody was interested whether I was confident or not confident. And in many cases, it was not even able to talk about those kind of things. And I think in one of the previous podcasts that we had, we were talking about, feeling safe in environments. And I think confidence comes when you start to feel safe. Yeah, because the moment that you do a misstep and it's okay, you can then discuss whatever happened that went wrong. Yeah, that builds your confidence big time. Yeah, because you know that, okay, I learned from it. I will not make the same mistake again. And the next time I will do it better. And I think this is a very healthy, environment to create in hotels. So.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree that learning from mistakes and learning from experience, build up confidence. We get probably a problem where you started when we get to the overconfident people, because overconfident people probably they are trying to hide something. That's why they are so confident. It's because they are trying to hide their weaknesses. They are trying to hide what they don't know. So they become the big person there. And that normally causes a few problems. And the biggest challenge that I see is with adapting to the industry changes, right? Customer behavioral change is faster and faster. Like, people are changing what they want in a faster pace as ever. And if you are not confident enough to understand that and be humbled enough to understand that you need to change your operations every now and then, you end up hurting the business, because if people change their behavior and all of a sudden you are not relevant anymore, your business hurts, right? How can leaders work that part of the confidence on understanding where I need to be confident enough to lead my team so they can actually believe in me, but be humble enough that I can see what I need to be changing and improving on myself?
I think you need to have a knowledge of the industry, first of all, first and foremost. If you are in your four walls inside your hotel and you're only worried about what is happening in your operations as a general manager, then you don't know the changes until it hits you. And you can be absolutely sure that somebody else will do the changes. And then you're fishing behind the net already. Doing things differently. I had a boss once who said, "Why do you want to do things differently? Just because? Is that what you..." And I said, "No, I believe that there is a change." And the rise, I was dragged into the rise of very luxurious hostels. Yeah, hostels that actually can compete with 4-star hotels. Yeah, and you will probably have a better service in that hostel than you got in some 4-star hotels. And that was a huge change. And that was exactly the same time that Airbnb suddenly came on the market. Yeah, suddenly hoteliers, they lost, room occupancy towards somebody that has an apartment and just rents it out. So you need to know what is going on. And the confidence of being able to make those changes is, I don't know where that confidence would be taught, because you need a mentor. You need somebody that comes from the outside and shows, hey, we need to change.
But if you and me now would try to be confident enough to throw a recipe there, I would think, like, as we're speaking, I would think that probably coming where that confidence comes from, right? One, you need to understand the industry. Yeah, that's if you want to be confident in your decisions, you need to kind of understand what's going on with the industry, where the industry is going, where the industry came from. Yeah, and understand that cyclical and things that once happened 40 years ago probably will happen again at some point with a little twitch. Then probably need to understand your business as well, right? Like the place you are working, your company, your associates, the people that you work with. Because if you're trying to do everything by yourself, I don't think that you ever be confident of your decisions, because you don't know who you are hurting at some point, right? What else could add to this list, Nah-Dja?
No, I think you put the nail on the head. I think confidence is being built if you look at it as a company, not as an individual person, is really about the interaction between the people. Yeah? If you are able to speak your mind, and a long time ago, I don't know if it's a confidence builder or not, but I had tubes in my hotel where you put a ball whether you feel good that day or not. Yeah, this is also related to the happiness at work ideas that I had. But what did that do? That people were confident enough to say, okay, I put my ball into the I'm not happy tube. Yeah, and okay, we leave you alone. They feel safe, they feel confident. And if you put it all together, all those little things, and you have some knowledge about the industry, I think then, confidence, you need to be able to understand your abilities. And, in one of the mental health sessions, I had a period in my life where I was the most confident person on the planet. And then due to multiple things, trauma is always difficult. You suddenly lost complete confidence in my abilities. So it's actually interesting now, because now we can put it all back together. Happiness at work, mentoring, having some creativity in the business. I think that if you are in the proper environment, people start to be feeling safe and understood, but also be able to tell their part of the story, or being listened to and being implemented, that your ideas are implemented. Yeah, that is definitely a confidence booster.
Boosted and probably finding happiness in hospitality, right?
But I think, this is a people's business. So you have to do something with people. And then if somebody who is not confident, and as a GM, you are able then, after a year, 2 years, whatever, after a period, that person goes away from you and finds a job somewhere else, which is a better paid job or a better position. Yeah, that is cool. That is stuff that I used to live for. So
amazing. So we are getting to the end here, to trying to make that building confidence is an important part of the job by creating a safe environment where people can actually be themselves, they can behave as they wish, and that way probably the confidence will be built up and they can perform better in the job. Would that sum up?
I think that sums it up perfectly. You were all sum things up, Mauricio.
Awesome. Now, thank you very much for sharing with me, and I can't wait to have the next episode with you.
All right. Thanks.
Schulering, hang up. There is more to come. Hello, lovely people, and welcome to another episode of the Schulering Hub podcast. And I'm your host, Mauricio Schuler, and today we are talking to the mind behind Purple Elephant Ventures. Ben Peterson, directly from Nairobi. Ben, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. It is a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to being grilled by all your hardest questions and hopefully have a few laughs along the way.
That's awesome, because, man, we met at the UN Tourism Startup Challenge in Gran Canaria, and you made an impression on me, man. You're super intelligent, and I was even like, oh, I'll get too close. He'll figure out that I'm not smart. So it's awesome to have you here, so I can ask you questions, you just talk, and then it looks like we're in the same level. But, man, how did you end up in Nairobi? Because you are original from Canada, right?
Correct. So, long story. I'm from Canada originally. After I graduated from grad school, I was trying to figure out what to do with my life, and I wanted to see Africa and get paid at the same time. So I randomly got a gig working for the Ghanaian Minister of Justice, so in Ghana, in West Africa. And this was back in 2001, long time ago. And that sort of set me on a 20-plus year career of working in and out of different parts of Africa. You asked specifically about Nairobi, so I will fast forward to 8 years ago. My wife and I, at the time, were living in Toronto, but we were looking to get back to the continent. And I had heard about all the cool things happening in Kenya's startup ecosystem, what they call the Silicon Savannah out here. And so I came out, I had a few friends here already, came out, checked it out, fell in love with the ecosystem and the country, and decided to make a move. So we moved out here 8 years ago. I was originally the senior partner at a venture capital fund here called AHL Venture Partners, doing investments across the continent. And then a few years ago, I said, enough is enough. I want to start Purple Elephant Ventures. And so I did. And I'm sure you'll have lots of questions about that. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Wow. So you were working before already with a VC company and getting explored into this Silicon Savannah world, right? And what's so interesting about the startup environment there in Nairobi?
Well, look, this is a continent that has, as I think the world is well aware, has been, has been underdeveloped, right? So you have some of the poorest countries in the world, but the stereotypes of Africa bound around war and famine and disease. And some of that is true, but it's certainly not the story of the entire continent. And what we've seen over the last, say, 20 years is a tremendous rise in incomes, in good governance and stability, and in all of these sort of factors that are starting to make business opportunities here more interesting. And, you layer the macroeconomic situation here on top of that, where you have the fastest growing population in the world, you have a massively young and increasingly well-educated population, and it starts to get interesting from a business perspective. And so when I moved out here 8 years ago, the VC world was relatively early. There weren't a ton of investors, weren't a ton of companies, but now fast forward 8 years later, and it's just the amount of, there's thousands of investors, there's tens of thousands of startups. There are just, endless opportunities that are being, endless challenges here that are now being solved by startups. And what's interesting here, what I love about the startup ecosystem here, probably more than anything, is that the startups here are solving real problems, right? Rather than a lot of the startups back home where, are solving the, trying to ultimately, how do you avoid walking sort of startups, here, just trying to make you lazier. Here you have startups that are ultimately putting food on people's tables and putting, electricity in people's homes for the first time, that are making real impactful differences to the day-to-day livelihoods of Africans. And it's really exciting to be part of that.
That's pretty cool, because it's pretty sad that here in Europe, there's, at least here in Europe, where I am, there is this vision that what Africa is. And when you put now that a young population, more and more getting educated and with real problems to solve, right? Real problems for millions of people to solve. So it seems to be a very cool environment for the startups to raise. And that's not what people see from here. So it's cool to have that side of the story. And how does Purple Elephant fit that environment?
So when I was at the VC fund, we did a scan of all the sectors on the continent. And we came to the conclusion that tourism is vastly underweighted in the amount of innovation and startups in the sector. So it's the third largest sector on the continent, but only a handful, literally under 5 startups in the entire continent in tourism had ever raised more than $100,000 before ventures showed up, right? And so it employs 20 plus million people on the continent, drives about 10% of the GDP of the continent, massively important, but really old school in the way that it operates. So, for example, most of the safari lodges don't even have an online presence, so you can't book safaris on their websites. Makes it really, really hard to access it for average people. And the more we dug into this problem, the more it was clear there were not just one problem, but dozens of infrastructure level problems, ecosystem level problems in the tourism sector here that needed to be solved. And so ultimately we landed on a venture studio model to solve these problems. So Purple Elephant Ventures is a venture studio. And by that, I mean, we build 3 or 4 startups a year from scratch. And all of our startups are the intersection of tourism, tech, and regeneration. So we're building regenerative tourism startups that are scalable. So we're not building traditional bricks and mortar tourism. We're building, businesses that are scalable across the entire ecosystem, like SaaS business and supply chain businesses and things of that sort that can improve the operations of many different operators ultimately across the entire continent. So really what we're trying to do is say we were trying to make tourism more green and more digital. And as the 3rd largest employer on the continent, it is extraordinarily important that tourism continues to play its rightful role and grows its footprint in the economic makeup of Africa. But it's also really important that it protects the natural environment that it so depends on. So over 95% of tourism in Africa is nature-based, so talking about safaris and beaches and this sort of thing. And those ecosystems that the industry depend on are increasingly under threat, especially in a continent that is industrializing fast and the population is growing fast. There's more and more pressure on the natural environment that is so important to the industry. And so tourism needs to grow, but grow responsibly, so it doesn't undermine the very essence of the attractions that it will.
And you just said about building 3 startups per year from scratch to solve challenges that are real, challenges that have a big impact, generative tourism, making more green, digital, protecting the environment. But I am building 1 startup, and it's quite a challenge. It's really, really tough, right? How can you build 3 startups per year? How do you structure that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And sometimes I think we're all a bit crazy for trying to do this. But I think what we do, we have a process, we have a system. So we study all the problems in the industry, and then we talk to various stakeholders that are involved in the industry and try to understand these problems from their perspective. Then we throw a bunch of ideas out there for potential solutions to those problems. And then we have a system where we can rank those solutions by various different methodology, like market size and time to market, cost to market, potential margins, et cetera. And then we take the best of those ideas, and then we have a team that are dedicated to do research on the best of those ideas. So we spend a month of desk research on per idea, where we basically come up with the product at the end of that month is an investable deck that lays out the pure business plan for this idea. We then take the best of those ideas that we build a deck for and move them into early validation. So we build a small MVP, and then we test if there's market traction. If there is not market traction, we kill that idea very quickly. But if there is market traction, then we hire a team of people to run that business, starting with a co-founder / CEO of that business. And we then support that co-founder to help build up their team and to go out and raise external capital necessary to take that business to the next level. So our job at the Venture Studio is to get an idea from 0 to 1. It is not to take the idea from 1 to 100. We support our co-founders, but we don't have to deal with the operational headaches of a business after a certain point, right? And so the whole idea of Purple Elephant Ventures, and really the Venture Studio model in general, is to basically build a manufacturing process for successful startups. So all startups are different, but they have common elements, right? So at our Venture Studio, we have a really good, we have someone who works with us on recruitment. We have a product team. We have designers. We have many different sort of sector or subject area specialists that can help across all of our startups And yeah, so that's the way that we operate. And really the key here is that we're building this manufacturing process. We apply the same structures, and the output at the end is a startup that has a high chance of success, not a startup that is fully baked and, is got millions of dollars of revenue. We like to see some revenue, we like to see a product, but really it's at that point that we hand it over to the co-founder. It's up to them to take this whole business to the next level.
So one thing that I got a question about the process is, when you said that you get the idea and you build the idea, validate the idea, right? And then you said that then you hire a co-founder to run the business. But who brings that idea? Do you have someone that already brings that idea and then you validate that and then you hire someone to run, or the other way around?
So in most cases, we've come up with the idea behind our startup. So we come up with a problem, we come up with the idea to solve that problem. However, there's been 2 instances where we have worked with someone else outside of our organization has come up with an idea and suggested we work with them to build a startup. And we like that. We still ran those through our process, but we like those ideas so much. At the end of the day, they were valid. We believe they were strong enough ideas to build them into startups.
And investment, where does it? Do you guys have a pool of VCs? Do you coach your co-founders to talk to VCs? How do you speak to a VC as you worked in a VC company before? How is that environment? Because for us startups, that's the hardest part of the puzzle, probably, and making an impression of the
and look, it's really hard. So we have. I come from a VC background. I know a lot of the players in the space. My co-founder led the biggest IPO in Kenya's history, has a very good relationships with more institutional investors. So between the 2 of us, we can cover a lot of the ground on the continent around relationships with investors. And we definitely help coach our co-founders and how to pitch and how to talk to VCs so that they're as well positioned as possible to raise capital. It's never easy, but I think, a big value proposition that we have for our co-founders is that we are experienced in both building successful businesses and also investing successfully in businesses. And so we lend those networks and, take some of the burden off our co-founders of raising capital. They do understand that it's very, very difficult. And it's a different world. Like there's, the unfortunate reality of the startup world is that, your ability to talk to VCs is often very different and removed from your ability to actually run your company. And so you have to be conversant in both in order to be successful if you are raising external capital. And so, we work with them to do that. We have, and, so far we have been, it's relatively early, right? So we've been going. We raised our first round of financing at Purple Elephant Ventures about 1.5 years ago. We've launched 5 businesses so far. We've raised money for 3 of those businesses, and 2 of them we're going to start raising money for shortly. But we've been relatively lucky in a really difficult market to be able to support our businesses.
What's from the VC point of view? What they're looking for?
Man, that's a long question. I actually just gave an hour-long seminar to a bunch of startups yesterday about that. And I think that there's a whole variety of different things. But look, at the end of the day, there's 2 things. You can boil everything down into 2 categories, at least in my experience. One is IRR, so internal rate of return. How fast can you make me money? So that is super important. Right. So you have to demonstrate that you can grow your business quickly and that you have a good, your market size is large enough and your business model is sufficient enough to sell into your target market at a quick enough rate to satisfy their IRR expectation. The second component is in this market, we have a lot of impact investors too, right? So the second component is impact, how much of an impact you are making and how that balances out with your IRR expectation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's you can break it down into different categories, but I think on the IRR side, really the two biggest components are your team, how good you are as a leader. And the problem is most investors won't tell you that it's you they don't want to invest. But if you get enough no's from investors that should otherwise be interested, it's probably you. And that's a really difficult thing for entrepreneurs to get their heads around. The other component is market. Like, how big is this market? How untapped is this market? How much competition is in their market? But ultimately, you can have, in my opinion, a big untapped market is more powerful than a good team, but you have to have both in order to hit a home run. So look, there's multiple different angles to look at this from, but that's in my experience. Those are some of the main drivers.
Yeah, that's cool. It's interesting. And I like the way that you said that, like, if you get enough no's, it's probably you, just nobody's telling you, and is a good reflection.
And I think, like, for me, one of the big benefits of a venture studio is that we can afford to be dispassionate about our business. We've launched a number of businesses that haven't worked, and we've killed them, and that's great. That's part of the process. But as an entrepreneur who gets so emotional about their businesses, and rightly so, it's hard for them to see the truth. There's a lot of negative confirmation biases, et cetera, in the way an entrepreneur tends to look at their businesses. And so you have to be really honest with yourself all the time as an entrepreneur. And that honesty is, often goes against the unbridled optimism that an entrepreneur needs to have, right? So you have to be both unbridled, like, you have to be like aggressively, unrealistically optimistic, but also like brutally honest at the same time. And that's a tough combo. But we as a venture studio hopefully can be both of those at the same time, because we can afford to kill a business. It's part of our model. Yeah. We can say, no, this sucks. We have to be tough with ourselves. That's part of the discipline of a venture studio model, while being always aggressively optimistic that, of course, we are going to build unicorns all over the place, right?
And from this, the 5 startups that you successfully launched in the past year, what are their areas, what they are doing, what the solutions?
Yeah, so we have, I'll tell you very quickly, and we can get into any specifics if you want, but in a nutshell, we have a business called Nomad Africa that is a content marketing agency. So we bought this business, actually. We bought the largest travel publishing business in Kenya, and then we converted it into an agency. So we have wonderful content, we have big social media following, big physical magazine following here in Kenya, but now instead of making money on advertising, we make sales on travel sales. And that business is doing very well. We have a supply chain business called Kajani Supplies. So one of the big problems in the industry here is there's no consolidated wholesaler of hospitality supplies in Kenya. And so we're building that business. So we're consolidating hospitality supply sales right now in the Masai Mara, the biggest game park in Kenya. And we will go from there as we grow. Business is doing very well. We have a business called Safari, which is a SaaS business. So one of the big problems that I mentioned earlier is that most even the high-end safari lodges, you can't book those experiences online. And it's really hard. They still take pen to paper to do bookings, like on a whiteboard. And so this is a system that is tailor-made for the African market, but helps get lodges and hotels online, there's a central reservation system, but then it's much more than that. It helps them supercharge their OTA sales, their agent sales, and their direct booking. And then we have a business called Power Trip, which is energy efficient clients business. So energy efficient appliances. Energy is extraordinarily expensive on the continent. And so we're trying to find better ways to get energy efficient appliances, especially in the hospitality sector, to ultimately lower energy bills and make hotels increase their margin by lowering their costs. Then we have our last business is a business called Join Africa that we're building with a guy named Paul English, who is the co-founder of Kayak. And he's got a venture studio in Boston called Boston Venture Studio. We're partnered with him and his venture studio to build this business called Join Africa, which is like kind of like Waze for safari guides that helps distribute safari cars more effectively through game parks, but also allows tourists to better memorialize their experiences and ultimately promote safari experiences to their friends back home. So those are our 5 startups right now, and we're hoping to build a whole bunch more as we move forward.
That's amazing. That's pretty cool. Well done. And like with the supply chain, that's the only one that I want to ask you. It's you're looking for any opportunities here from Europe, from around the world, to anyone that maybe our listeners here get to like, whoa, is there an opportunity for me here?
Absolutely, man. There's opportunities for anybody who's interested in African tourism. I would love to talk to you. You know, Nomad sells a lot of safaris to international, to European travelers. Kajani supplies, the supply chain business. Yes, we could sell your supplies into African hospitality, high-end safari lodges, et cetera, et cetera. I think there's a lot of different opportunities. And of course, if there's any investors listening, we'd love to talk to you as well. We're always interested in having conversations with folks that are interested in exploring the African hospitality market.
Now, just let's think a little bit about the future of the African tourism, because as you just spoke well here, that there are many challenges, there are lots of opportunities, but lots of challenges as well happening, mainly with the environment, probably over tourism, safaris, and you mentioned that in Gran Canaria, that over tourism safaris is a disaster because basically the animals disappear because of the over tourism. So what's the future of the African tourism? How do you see that developing, and which way is the continent taking that path to actually have a healthy tourism system there?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think there's a few different points. One is to optimize tourism in the tourism hotspots without disrupting the natural environment. So yes, there are instances in the Masai Mara, which is the big game park here in Kenya, where during high season, you might have 50 safari cars gathered around one poor animal. And it is not good for the animals, it's not good for tourists. And so, but the industry relies on these tourists coming in. And so the question is, how do you keep tourists and even increase the number of tourists while protecting, while eliminating those kinds of experiences? And so we're looking at, that's exactly why we're building Join Africa as a methodology, using technology to try to better distribute safari cars in these game parks to avoid overcrowding and avoid this sort of Disneyland feeling that can come with too many tourists around. And I think that's very possible if you're able to deploy the right type of technology. The second component, I think, for African tourism is to build new tourism hotspots, right? So right now you think of tourism in Africa, you probably think of a couple things. You probably think of safaris in Kenya and Tanzania. You probably think of maybe safari and wine country in South Africa. And you might think of, beaches in Morocco and maybe, the pyramids in Egypt. But that's about it. Meanwhile, there are actually thousands of really world-class tourism experiences here. For example, I was just on the beach in Kenya the other day, and Kenyan beaches are world-class. They're incredible. I think building out, getting more tourists here and getting, really being able to highlight really, cool experience. Now that the continent is increasingly safe, increasingly better accessibility from flight paths, et cetera, et cetera. I think we're going to start to see new experiences open up in ways that we haven't seen before. But regardless of those experiences, what I think needs to also happen is the infrastructure underneath the tourism industry needs to become a lot more modern. And unfortunately, right now, it's very, very old school here.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you have to have proper supply chains. You have to have proper booking technology and all these things that some of our startups are trying to tackle as well. But ultimately, I think we're going to see a massive change in the way the world understands Africa in the next 10 or 15 years. And a lot of that change is going to be led by the opening up of new and genuine and ultimately life-changing experiences that we'll have here and now.
That's super cool, Ben. That's actually super cool to understand. Like, as you were speaking about the hotspots, like it took me back to Brazil, right? Because when you think about Brazil, about South America, everyone thinks about like two cities, maybe like Rio, maybe the Northeast, that they incorporate all in one town, but Brazil is bigger than Europe.
Yeah.
And there are so many little things inside the country that is not related to the beach that people don't know. Luckily in Brazil, we have a lot of internal tourism, so Brazilians don't travel out so much, so they travel in the country a lot, and that already feeds that tourism industry. But I imagine that in Africa, as the continent becomes stronger, becomes safer, that internal tourism starts to be a little bit more feasible to happen as well, and can feel more of the investment there, right?
Domestic tourism has really boomed since COVID. So during COVID, a lot of, typically wealthier Africans have decided that they didn't really want to travel in Africa, so they ended up traveling to Europe or Dubai. And during COVID, all those opportunities were shut down, but a lot of internal travel started happening, and it hasn't actually slowed down since COVID has ended. It's now sort of a cool thing to travel within Kenya and other parts of Africa for Africans, and I think that's a really cool development.
Ben, you are doing a massive job there, and it's awesome to see it. I wish that like Purple Elephant and Adventures Capital.
Thank you. You can say all the nice things you want, but I still haven't done my job if you haven't come to visit me. So come here, check it out. We'll go on safari, and you gotta come. It really is a life-changing thing to come, be here, be one with these amazing animals and the amazing experiences. And the cultures here, of course, are just warm and so rich in so many ways that it's hard for us in the West to even get our head.
Man, I will go, but more people here want to know how they can go. So how can they contact you, talk to you, get to learn more about?
Okay, so go to our website, purpleelephant.ventures. And if you're interested in traveling to Africa, you should check out our business, Nomad Africa, which is at nomad.africa. Very easy to understand. And through the website, you can contact us directly, and would be happy to follow up and have a chat, obviously.
And I'll put all the links there so people can talk to you. It's a pleasure to talk to you once again, Ben. Your mind is great. So thank you very much for accepting and being here in the show.
You're a good man. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day. Thanks for having me,
Matt. Schulering, thanks for listening. I'll see you next time. Bye.